Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hard-working Americans and their families?
You will! This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefits in your benefit plan. Now prepare to learn,
Plan,
save,
and protect with the FIA Group.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest installment of the FIA Group's podcast, Empowering Plans. I am John Jablon, and with me is Kendall Jackson. Say hi, Kendall.
Hello.
You know, I think I say this often, but it's nice that you don't do what Brady does and say, hi, Kendall, because that's just obnoxious. But anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody. And today we want to talk about a topic that has become recently near and dear to most of our hearts, artificial intelligence. Yeah. Everybody is using it in some respect, right? I mean, from businesses right down to individuals like us. And it's getting so interesting because the evolution of AI is happening right before our eyes. We are in a spot in human history where things are really getting very, very interesting. And I say human history, but maybe this is like robot history, right? Maybe this is like the start of the computer uprising, the end of the human era, and now we're in the post-human era. I think that's already a phrase, and I don't think that's what it means. It doesn't matter. But anyway, AI, very, very pervasive, and we've seen it causing some, let's say, issues in our industry, as well as lots of other industries. And just a couple of things that I want to bring up before we start with respect to AI specifically. Kendall, I know that we've talked about some of this, and we've all seen it in the news, right? Attorneys using AI to generate case law and arguments, but it's not real, right? I mean, sometimes it does an okay job, but very, very often AI does what's called hallucinating, where it says, oh yeah, this case says exactly what you want it to say. And then you look it up and you're like, well, that's not a case at all. Those names don't exist. Or that there's no page 74 of that case. Or this case is about something completely unrelated to the topic that it's about. It's always so interesting, right? Because like we use AI a fair bit at FIA, but we don't use it to generate arguments or anything like that. We sometimes use it as a starting point to look, to do research, right? Because the world of regulations is incredibly broad. And sometimes you just need a way to find out where to even begin. But we know better than to use it without checking it first, or maybe even double checking it. And, you know, it's so funny too, because it's not just attorneys, it's doctors and professors, and everybody is using it, but the extent to which they're double checking what they're doing, well, it's interesting, right? Because some people are not being as diligent as they could be in making sure that AI says what it should be saying, or really reflects what a human is thinking. And that's what we're going to be talking about a bit today. And Kendall, I know that you have some personal experience, or your mom does. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, my mom is a professor at a college, and she's encountered a lot of AI recently from her students, where she can very much clearly tell that some of the reports or memos or things she's getting from students are written by AI. And it's sort of a delicate balance of sort of how to address that and the use of AI from students specifically, because obviously the point is to learn and make sure they're understanding everything that they're learning in school, and so they can apply that afterwards. So the use of AI is definitely questionable there, and it's a new topic that they have to deal with and a new issue that they try to address, but it's definitely getting more common.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm all for, clarifying complex concepts with AI and sort of helping people explain things, right? But yeah, it makes me a little bit uneasy if nursing students are writing papers with AI, because I want nurses to know what they're doing, not have, not just look to a computer. So strange world we live in today. So we've got a couple of case studies and one actual court case that we want to talk about today. And I'll get on with the first case study. This is something that recently crossed our desks, and who the individuals that are listening to this podcast, you may hear this and think, oh, this was us. Maybe, but it also is possible that this just happened to you because this is becoming more and more common. So basically what happened is a broker and a TPA had a meeting online via, I don't know, whatever platform, whether it was Teams or Zoom, or one of the others. And they had one of those AI chatbots automatically log in and listen in and make a transcript and summarize things, and super helpful stuff, right? I think most of us have seen that at this point, where the AI comes on and it tells you your level of engagement and who said what and the action items. Fantastic technology. Absolutely amazing. Super helpful for so many people. It's great. A couple of issues there, though. One, in this particular case, the AI chatbot was set in its settings, whatever function or whatever form those took, it was set to automatically email the transcript and notes and action items and whatnot to all of the invitees. As it turns out, there were many more invitees than actually joined the call. There was a bit of PHI discussed, nothing terrible, but enough to actually make it PHI. There was some PHI discussed in the call, and that was reflected in the transcript, obviously, and also in the summary and notes, right? Because the AI chatbot is not designed to filter out AI. It is just designed to say, okay, what did you talk about? Let's summarize it. And the transcript especially, that's word for word, right? So there's no filtering there. So everything was sent to all the invitees. And one of the entities came back and said, whoa, this is too much. This should not have been sent to everybody here. Not everybody was on the call. I mean, this contains PHI. This is a problem. And they're absolutely right. When there's PHI in a transcript, it's the same as a recording, right? Even if this were a non-AI recording, if this were sent to everybody, it would be a bit of a HIPAA issue because, it's not necessarily the case that everybody on the call didn't have a need to know the information, right? Sometimes people who aren't on a call still need to know some PHI. That's sort of the nature of PHI, is that sometimes it does need to be shared. But it doesn't always, right? And if an individual didn't join the call, it's probably a safe assumption that that individual didn't join the call because that individual didn't have a need to know the PHI. At the very least, it is very important to curate what's going on with PHI after it is in a transcript or a recording or an AI summary or whatnot. Our best recommendation in a situation like that is don't have the summary and transcript sent directly to everybody automatically. Make sure that it's sent only to those who need it. And as a general note, even though it's not always feasible to avoid talking about PHI specifically, if you can avoid it, you should try. Because it's not just an AI issue, right? This goes beyond just AI. This is a HIPAA issue entirely. So even individuals on the call, and we know better than anybody that sometimes calls include lots of people who don't necessarily need to be on the call. I frequently find myself on calls and I'm like, why am I here? But for any individuals who don't need to be on the call to begin with, hearing that PHI, even if it's discussed in the normal course of business, if you don't actually need it, if you're just on the call as sort of an ancillary set of ears, that could cross the line into a HIPAA violation. So please be very, very careful about HIPAA. HIPAA is serious, serious business, AI or not. It's very important to make sure that you follow HIPAA's what's called a minimum necessary requirement, which basically means that if you don't have a need to know the information, you do not have a right to know it. Or more specifically, somebody does not have the right to disclose it to you, right? The responsibility is not on the listener to go, no, I'm not listening. The responsibility is on the person divulging the PHI to make sure that they don't, if they actually don't need to. So in general, right, and especially because AI and these types of bots are becoming more and more pervasive, if you can talk about an issue and say, the patient or the situation, instead of actually referencing somebody by name or divulging medical information, it's a really, really good idea to try to do that. Like I said, it's not always possible, but to the extent you can avoid giving out PHI on a call with a bunch of people, we strongly recommend it. So now let's move on. Kendall, we've got a good, some case law going on here, and it's not finalized yet, right? I mean, cases rarely are ever, but we've got something that's in the works. Why don't you talk about it?
Yeah. So this case has to do with United Healthcare. The case is the estate of Loken v. United Health Group. And essentially this case was centered around United Healthcare's use of AI to predict and auto-adjudicate post-acute care claims, things like rehab and skilled nursing facilities. Now, it turns out that the using this algorithm, the AI was actually wrong about 90% of the time, more than 90% of the time for claims denials and over 80% for pre-auth denials. And so those percentages ended up being overturned on appeal. And so essentially what the algorithm was doing was estimating the appropriate length of treatment that was required for these individuals. But the key there is that these were estimates based on the data that it was analyzing. And what United Healthcare was doing was essentially using these estimates as caps and then denying coverage. So that was a bit concerning there, that they're relying entirely on the AI in that regard. And so essentially there were several allegations in this case, some of those being that they prioritized cost savings and profits over patient care. The plaintiffs were alleging that United Healthcare knew that this algorithm was flawed, but were using it anyways. Also that they failed to provide individualized clinical reviews when needed and when requested by patients. And then lastly, that United Healthcare was approving any appeals once they reached the late stages of the internal appeals process. And they were saying that this was wrongful because they were never able to reach the level of external review because the appeals were being overturned while they were still in the late stages of the internal appeals process. Now, the plaintiffs have brought forth some very serious and very sad outcomes, unfortunately, one of which a plaintiff, their father ended up passing away. They were allegedly denied rehab care several times despite an ongoing need for that care and were forced to return home because they couldn't afford the care out of pocket. And then, as I said, he later passed away. So there are definitely some serious outcomes here that the patients are bringing up. And this actually isn't the first time we've seen a lawsuit like this. A very similar lawsuit was filed against Cigna in 2023 for allegedly misusing algorithms to deny claims. So this could be something we're seeing more and more as TPAs are using algorithms for claims decisions. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this case actually turns out, but it definitely demonstrates and exemplifies how the legal system is now having to sort of navigate the use of AI in healthcare. We're sort of in uncharted waters here since we're only in the beginning of the use of AI. So yeah, very interesting.
Kendall, I have two questions for you. Sure. One, do you know whether that 2023 Cigna case, you said they use an algorithm. Do you know if that was AI or was that just sort of formulaic?
It was another AI algorithm.
Yeah. Oh, it was?
Yep.
That's interesting. I mean, that was, I had to look at the year here. That was 2 years ago. And even what we're saying about AI now, how it's not perfect, 2 years ago, it was even less perfect. Yeah. So that's really interesting. And my other question for you is, what would you say to people who might defend UHC by saying, well, if it was overturned on appeal, we're fixing the mistakes, so what's the big deal? What would you say?
Well, I think some of these unfortunate outcomes are sort of examples of why it's just because it's necessarily overturned later on appeal, the harm that it could have in the interim while they're going through the appeal process. And you also just have to think about sort of even just moral obligations too, to all these patients who need this necessary care. In the case of those 80 to 90% of claims that actually ended up being overturned, those people needed that care. It was medically necessary. And they should have been given that care and weren't. So the more we prolong that, the more risks it poses to those patients. So
yeah, that makes sense. From an ERISA perspective, we have seen a lot of people through the years say basically, whether we deny a claim in the beginning, it doesn't matter. That's what appeals are for, right? And our answer is always, well, sort of. You can't just arbitrarily deny claims and let your appeals processes deal with it, because if nothing else, you're forcing patients to jump through hoops to get the answers that they should have gotten to begin with. Now, honest mistakes happen, right? That is why appeals exist, but it shouldn't be a systemic issue. It shouldn't be considered, unimportant to get it right the first time because you'll figure it out on the back end. It should be very important to get it right the first time, and then sometimes things fall through the cracks and those can be fixed on appeal, but it should never be, whatever. And that seems to be what's going on with UHC here. They knew that their algorithms were bad, and they obviously knew it, right? I mean, if 90% of the time it's wrong, well, let's think about it, And the court, I don't believe, when I read through it, I didn't think that UHC said, oh, we had no idea. I don't think that they raised that, because they would have just looked terrible had they played dumb, because they're not dumb, right? They're UHC. They're very smart. They know exactly what they're doing, which in a way makes this worse. But we'll leave that for the court. So thank you for that case summary. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
And the last case study I want to mention here is it's not a specific case. It's actually quite pervasive in the TPA industry. We often see TPAs using AI, and they run emergency claims and coding and scenarios through AI in order to figure out whether they are true emergencies, right? Whether they actually have to be covered as emergencies. And with the advent of the No Surprises Act, the prudent layperson standard has become more important. And the prudent layperson standard basically says, boiled down, you can't use coding to figure out whether an ER admission is actually an emergency. You have to base it on that prudent layperson standard, which basically means if the patient believed that his life or health were in serious jeopardy if he didn't go to the ER, then it's an emergency. It is, in a way, very subjective based on the patient, but it's also, the word prudent layperson there, it's right there in the standard. That sort of colors the subjectivity. And the plan sort of has to do a coding review to make sure, or not a coding review, sorry, a clinical review to figure out, was the patient really justified in thinking that his or her life were actually in danger? And sometimes that can get complicated, right? Because different people might reach a different opinion, and that's okay. That happens, and that's one of the functions of appeals, one of the functions of even IRO review, right? Because it's a clinical decision. But at the end of the day, what you can't do is have an artificial intelligence product opine on whether the situation was warranted. Because not only is AI often wrong, but AI doesn't, or it is proven time and time again that it doesn't understand the nuances of the prudent layperson standard. We still frequently see AI giving TPAs the opinion that, no, this was not emergent because the coding, or because of what they did in the ER, or stuff like that. And it's not okay anymore. The No Surprises Act doesn't allow you to make those types of decisions. And while AI can be very sophisticated, certain models are and certain models aren't. And that brings me to, I just want to quickly differentiate between the different types of AI. And some of you may know this, some of you may not, but it's very important to differentiate, because if you're looking to use AI, or if you're already using AI, you need to know whether the AI you're using is actually sufficient for your needs. So, two main types of AIs. One is a chatbot. It's called an LLM. It's a large language model. It is incredibly sophisticated, but it's essentially predictive text. It looks at a giant corpus of information, right? Huge, ridiculously big body of text. And it very, very quickly predicts what the next word should be in generating a response. That's incredible. I mean, the technology just blows my mind, but it's not doing meaningful reasoning. It's just looking at text and saying, well, this is what this corpus of data provides, and so this is what we're going to provide. It's fantastic with language. If you wanted to tell your 6-year-old a story, like I frequently do, it is amazing. But when it comes to reasoning, it doesn't do it. That's not what it's for. It's just not designed for that. So when you're looking to, try to figure out whether the prudent layperson standard applies, an LLM, a large language model, is not your best bet for that. It's not designed to provide, it's more of a writer. It's not a thinker, let's say. So the other type of model is called a reasoning model. It is much smarter, much more advanced, and overall it's better, right? It is better for things like this. It's a little bit slower, and it's usually more expensive for companies looking to use it, but it is very, very important that your AI can think instead of just telling you what word should probably come next based on the corpus. It is designed for structured decision making. That is exactly what you need if you're doing an analysis like this. If you're using AI or thinking about using AI, make sure you know what you're getting into, right? If all you're using is an LLM, that large language model, it's really just that. It's generating text. But if you need it to do reasoning, then that is what you need. It is more expensive. For a lot of companies, it is cost prohibitive. But if that's the case, then that's the case, maybe, right? But don't skimp, is my point. If you skimp on AI, if you go for the cheaper option, you might not be getting exactly what you think you're getting. So Kendall, you want to take us out of here?
Yeah, I guess just some sort of some final thoughts here when we're thinking about AI. As I mentioned earlier, it's definitely still in its early stages when we think about integrating AI into our industry, but also its accuracy. It's going to get more accurate over time, but we're still in the early stages. So there's definitely some room for improvement there. We don't think it's going away, for sure. It's appealing for a variety of reasons. It improves efficiency. It saves a lot of time, as anybody can attest, even if you just use it in your day-to-day life, and can certainly streamline certain services. But just some things to consider if you are going to use it in your workplace. Want to try and reduce any biases if we are using AI algorithms by using data sets that are representative of a wide range of perspectives, increasing transparency with how AI is being used, and making sure that it complies with applicable regulations. As John mentioned earlier, the importance of limiting the use of PHI entirely if possible, and if it's necessary, just using it within the confines of how it's permitted under HIPAA. And then lastly, just conducting regular audits on the AI mechanisms that you're using to make sure they're operating appropriately, and just sort of maintaining those and improving them where you can. Yeah, that's all I have. John, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I am done. My throat is dry. I'm going to get a drink. Thank you, Kendall, and thank you to everybody listening here. And if you've got any questions on any of what we talked about or anything else, please do not hesitate to contact the FIA group. We are more than happy to help. Thanks, Kendall, and thanks, everybody. Talk soon.